If you've ever been in a situation where you're trying to make a decision and it's a really difficult decision, possibly with some emotional attachment to it or some financial attachment to it, and you just can't make the decision, then I've just put together this document, which I'm going to talk you through. And this is everything that I do step by step to make sure that I can make a comfortable decision without it bearing a humongous emotional baggage with it. So let's have a look and we'll dive in. This isn't going to be just another boring video. This is going to be an actual worksheet. It's an action-based document. So might share some details on how you can get this document if you want it. But ultimately, we're going to be talking about how to manage your emotions, make tough decisions, and kind of avoid the fear element that comes with it. So let's dive in. So in terms of first step is going to be, we want to map out the worst case scenario. So you're about to invest in something, you're about to do something, you're about to hire something, like literally anything that you're about to do. And you're nervous, you're on the fence about it, you're thinking, you know what, this isn't going to work out. I don't know how to figure this out. It's like, should I do this? Should I not do this? And you're literally sitting there thinking like it could be the right thing, it might be a bad thing, and you just can't make a decision. So that's the process that we're going to walk through, which is how do you get to a place where you can make a firm decision. So step one is map out what is the worst case scenario. So what happens on the other side of if the worst case scenario happens. So let's just say you're about to invest in a personal trainer. Okay, your worst case scenario is probably going to be that you lose a little bit of money. That's it. Okay. Provided the personal trainer doesn't get you to do something that is absolutely outrageous, like, I don't know, ride a unicycle on a tightrope between some of the canyons, Grand Canyon, maybe somewhere around there. Like, there's some things that are absolutely insane where, you know, you're gonna end up with what is permanent damage. So let's just work it all out. What is the worst case scenario if this did not work out? Okay, what would you genuinely lose, and how can you recover from it? And in most cases, I don't know why I put month there. That should be money. In most cases, you're going to lose one of two things, and that is time or money. One of those two things you're going to lose. And the only thing that you really, really need to consider at this stage is how much of this is actually permanent damage, meaning that can you possibly recover from any of this ever? And if it's time or money, then the chances are you still have some time left. The fact that you're able to have this conversation, or you're watching this video, or you're having the ability to reconsider things, then you still have time. Okay. If you are going to lose some money, then look, you can recover from them. Okay. These are not permanent damage items. Now, if you're about to do something where the result at the end of it is going to be a case where you lose a limb, like they're going to have to amputate your arm or your leg or something like that. Like, this is permanent damage. You cannot recover from something like that. And this is what you need to be thinking about when you consider the worst case scenario. Like, what is actually going to happen if I went and did this and it just did not work out? What is the worst case scenario? So paint that picture for yourself. Use this document. If I leave the notes below, use something like this. Write down what is the worst case scenario that could happen if you went and took this decision. Okay, that's step one. Step two is you want to figure out how you can actually reduce the risk. So what is it that you're going to lose? So let's just go for that worst case scenario. Like, let's say you're going to lose a limb. Like, that's the worst case scenario. So you have to your arm amputated. If that's what's going to happen, then how can you reduce that risk? Like, it's not going to happen overnight. It might be that you're doing something really dangerous, like, can you wear protective gear? And, you know, I'm relating this back to a personal trainer example as well. Like, your worst case scenario might be that you injure yourself, you don't use the equipment properly, or maybe you lift a little bit too much weight and you damage that, or you just hurt yourself. So in those situations, what can you do to mitigate and reduce the risk that you're going to incur? And that is, you have somebody who's going to watch over you. You have somebody show you how to use the equipment, especially if it's your first time doing so. And if you are about to invest in something from a financial perspective or a time, then or a time perspective, then understand, like, what is it going to take to reduce the risk? Like, it's very different asking somebody to buy something that costs, I don't know, let's say £10,000 or dollars or euros, and it's really difficult to get somebody to spend that amount of money when they only have 2,000 in their bank account. That bit is really difficult because now there's another thing that comes into it, and that is the ROI. Is it worth the risk? I'll come on to that in a moment. But the point is that the risk is really difficult to mitigate when it's more than everything that you have. However, when it's not everything that you have, it's a little bit easier to stomach and manage. So that's one way of mitigating risk, and that is that if it is a financial commitment that you're going to have, make sure you're not stretching everything out to the point that your entire life could collapse if you made this decision. Having said that, there are certain times where it's actually worth it. It's actually worth risking all of that, and everything depends on ROI, which is return on investment. So when it is worth it in terms of an ROI perspective, it's like this. If I said to you, I have a brand new Ferrari and it's £10,000, brand new Ferrari, zero only delivery mileage, and it's straight out the showroom, basically parked up downstairs or in my basement, however you might have your layout for your drive or garage or whatever it might be. Okay, you've got a Ferrari, 10,000. Okay, even if you didn't have that money available, you probably figure out how to get the money because you know the ROI and you know what it's worth. And you, even though you might not have sold a Ferrari before, you know places where you could go and get it valued and potentially get that money back. And now, even if there was a situation where you were risking everything that you had and you had to borrow money of friends and family because you're going to go into debt to make it work, then because you know the ROI that's going to come out on the other end of this, it's worth it and you make it work. So in terms of reducing the risk, you reduce the risk in terms of understanding what you're actually getting on the other side and weighing up the ROI, but also considering what you can do to reduce the actual risk. And when I say actual risk, I'm referring to time, money, temporary and permanent damages that we would have identified earlier up here. Okay, so that's step 2 done. Step 3 is, let's just say the worst case scenario did happen. Even though you tried to mitigate it and you tried to reduce the risk, what would you do to recover from it? So now, in the case of buying a Ferrari for 10K, then the only thing that's going to happen is going to take you longer to sell it. There's your worst case scenario. Might take you a little bit longer than you had anticipated to sell it. But now, if you had invested in a personal trainer and you lost a few £1,000s or more, depending on what kind of personal trainer you use, then your worst case scenario is you've lost some money. Boom. Okay. And you have to link this to what you've actually lost. Okay. So when I refer back to it, and I said you would have lost some money, you have to refer back to the document for yourself for whichever exercise whatever you're planning on going through and using this exercise as a model. Then you have to go through and figure out what would you have actually lost genuinely, like what would you have actually lost? And in most cases, it would have been some money and some time that you would have put into it. There's your worst case scenario. The fact that you're still here, you still have time, and whatever money that you have, you can recover from it. Always can. Okay. So these are things that you've got to consider, which is how would you recover from it? And in most cases, you can recover from it. The only things that you cannot recover from is permanent damage. So if you're literally risking your life in the decision that you're about to make, then depending on the outcome on the other side, then it's probably not worth it. Okay. So let's keep going. So number 4, what could actually go to plan? And this is commonly overlooked because I'd say from the conversations that I've had for the majority of people that I speak to, most people are risk averse and they would prefer not to take a risk. However, we have to consider the upside, and it's easy to really focus in on what is the downside, but we very rarely consider what is the upside. So what is the actual positive outcome? And if you write down every single positive outcome that could come out on the other side of it, then you have to ask the question, is it then worth it? So if I paint the picture of the example of, let's say, a personal trainer, on the other side of it, what happens? Your health is a little bit better. You'll probably be more focused. You would be more energized. You're probably going to perform better at work, and your health is going to have a massive improvement. Now, is that as an ROI worth it for you for what you're about to invest? Now, you've got to ask that question to yourself. Let's have another example. Let's just say you bought this Ferrari for 10K. What happens? Now, your confidence might improve. You know you're going to have some cash once you go and sell it. If you want to drive it around and you want to enjoy it, then you get that luxury aspect of it as well. Is that worth it? Considering the risk that you might have incurred, even though you didn't have 10 grand in the bank and you've gone into debt so that you can go and do it. Is it worth it for you? I don't know. I don't know. But for most people, a Ferrari at 10K is worth it because you can easily just sell it for significantly more than that. So when you are considering the decision that you're going to make, you have to deep down really consider what happens on the other side of this if it does go to, like, what happens if everything goes exactly as you expected it? Like, what happens to your health? What happens to your wealth? What happens to your free time? What happens to the quality of your time? The quality time that you have with your family, your loved ones, like absolutely every single angle. In fact, it'd be well worth you even scoring yourself out of 10 on these things mentioned in the document for where they position themselves right now and where they would be on the other side of this investment that you're going to make. Like, what does your health, wealth, your free time, the quality of your time all look like on the other side of it? And you can measure it depending on what you're investing in. It might be like your relationships, it might be the quality of your life, it might be like your sleep routine. Like, some people are OCD with some of these things. Like, you can look at every single thing from every single angle for all the things that are important to you. Score yourself now and score yourself out of 10 for what they would be like on the other side of this. And then ask yourself the question, what happens if everything does go to plan? So now you've got everything laid out in front of you. You would have your worst case scenario, how you would reduce the risk, how you would recover from it if it didn't go as planned, what could go your way, as in what if everything did go as planned. And now you're in a really good position to actually make a decision at this stage. You should already be in a position to make a decision, on what you're about to do. And when you consider that, now you have to ask this question. You've got to weigh everything up. And that is, you've got to weigh up the upside, you've got to weigh up the downside, and you also have to consider what happens if you do not make a decision at all. Meaning that you come across this personal trainer who is promising to change your life. I'm giving the example of personal trainer, or the opportunity to buy a Ferrari, or the opportunity to take this job that you're probably considering of, or grow your business, or all these different things that you are available today. And when you consider all of those things, you have to weigh up the upside and you've got to consider the downside. Like, what is the best case scenario on the other side? Like, my health goes through the roof, I become rich, I have loads of free time, the quality of my time improves, my family love me, and I get to keep the Ferrari as well. Like, this is all the upside stuff. Okay, fantastic, brilliant. And then you've got to consider the downside of what's the worst case scenario? I'm going to lose £10,000. Like, if that is it, like, if that's your all that upside and then you've got all this downside, then the way up should be really, really easy for you to consider. And then you've got to consider the opposite as well, meaning that, okay, let's look at all the downside items and then weigh up against the upside. So now they're your two real options, because the third option, which I've mentioned here, is no change at all, is what happens if you do not make a decision. What if it's one of those scenarios where it's like, I'm going to take some time to think about it, and you can't decide whether it's going to be a week, a month, or 2 years. And you sit there and you think about, what happens if I don't do this? And when you consider not doing it, then the only thing that happens is that your worst case scenario, which is the downside, doesn't actually change, but your best case scenario, you delay it. Because if you had decided to take action now, which is in the direction of what is positive change, and you decide to take that action right now, then it's only a matter of time before you see the result that you want to achieve based on what is being presented to you. And the downside, you lose that immediately and you get over it pretty quickly, and then you move on and work towards recovering it, because the upside probably includes a recovery plan for the downside anyway. So now, when you are not doing anything, it's actually the worst position to be in, because then you haven't made a decision at all. You haven't made a commitment. You haven't decided whether things are going to go downhill for you or they're going to go uphill for you. You are just flatlining. And I'd argue that here, this is something that you've got to really weigh up, because there's probably so many instances that you can think back on when you think, what, I should have done that. I should have given that a go. This is that. This is like the situation playing out, which is where you decided not to take action because maybe you didn't consider the upside or the downside or the risk or the ROI and all of these things. And when you consider all of these things together, you realize that not taking action is actually the worst possible thing that you can do, because now you have no change in direction whatsoever. Whereas even if you did take an action and it didn't go to plan, at least you know what the downside is and you know how to recover from it. And you can, you have a slight dip in however you're measuring things and you can improve again. And then on the upside, like, it could have just been completely uphill from there on, like, straight. So if that's what you're weighing up against, then this one, which is no change at all or no action at all, shouldn't be a problem. Like, it should be either go for the upside and risk whatever you're risking. In most cases, it's probably going to be some money and some time invested in it. Or you your worst case scenario is that you're going to lose a little bit of money, which you can recover from. Just work a bit more. Maybe you have to go and get a job. Maybe you have to change something. Whatever happens. Like maybe you don't want to, but you know you can recover from it. Okay. So final thing is just decide. That's it. Like if you don't decide, then you're basically stuck at 0.5 and you go to no change at all. But ultimately, you want to come to a decision where you can decide exactly how this is going to work out, how this is going to come through, make it work, make a commitment, give it your best shot. And guess what? On the other side, it probably will go as planned, just like everything. Sometimes things work out, sometimes things don't. But ultimately, it's the upside that you're weighing up, and it's the upside that you are interested in. It's the upside is the reason why you even engaged in a conversation with whatever you're considering. So that's how I make decisions. I just literally map it out. I don't, put this document together now, but I follow this pretty much the exact same process every single time. I look through it, I read through it, weigh up the upside, weigh up the downside. What's the real risk? What's the real thing that I could be losing? And yeah, now I've begun to embrace fear and embrace risk. So I hope that you find it valuable, and I'll see you in the next one.